Hello, this is Lisa Lee and welcome to my channel. Today we are going to be looking at the archetype of the Barren Woman. Now when I say Barren Woman, that's an offensive phrase actually, but it's an old phrase, it's an ancient phrase, and it's an archetype that takes form in stories and scriptures, and it's also something that I was doing some research and I was sort of just like looking up, you know, where do we see this archetype showing up and what does this really mean and what does that phrase really mean? And when I was looking at childless women and barren women as like just something to start researching, I don't have children, and I'm not going to have children, and so this is a personal issue for me to delve into with the cards. But I also found that there were like two very distinct camps. There were people who were sort of defending a decision not to have children, like women who were saying, I never wanted children, I don't want children, it's offensive to ask me. You know, if I want children when I don't want children, and this is my choice and this is what I'm doing. And then there were women who said something along the lines of, you never know why someone isn't childless. Some people want children and they don't have a choice. They don't have a choice because of health reasons. They don't have a choice because of circumstances, and the grief and the wounding around choosing not to have children because you can't for one reason or another is something I don't think that gets enough it doesn't get enough air. We don't look at this enough. We don't connect with this enough. And so when I went into meditation, I called in our ascended ancestors and our ascended guides that are with different types, right? So I called our ascended ancestors and then our ascended guides that were women who were deemed barren, women who wanted to have children and it didn't happen. It never happened. And then I called the ancestors that chose not to have children. And then I called the ancestors that were forced to have children when they didn't want to. And I called these different ancestors forth to help me with this reading. And I also want to talk a little bit about the nature of what feels barren energetically. And I was kind of talking to these ancestors and I was like, this is a really sticky, this is a really painful archetype, and every time I see women talking about it, again, it comes into these, like, it's either in defense of, or, you know, a grief place that we don't have a way of talking about, or the way that people treat women who don't have children, and the way that society has always treated women who don't have children. But then there's this other aspect of fertility that is, I think, especially painful for people, where they have projects, books, ideas, art, careers, things that they have tried to bring life to, and efforts that they have made that have been efforts that were miscarried. So things that, you know, projects that you started, even something like a marriage that failed, you know, can feel like something that you worked on, that you put all your creative energy in. It can feel like a child dies when that opportunity forecloses, or that thing didn't work out. And so there's also this notion of like fertility and creativity, fertility and bringing life, fertility in terms of making relationships that take on life and hold life, you know? So it's a big topic, it's a thorny topic, but we're going in with ascended ancestors and ascended guides that love us, and we're going to bring through their wisdom, their experience, and what they have to say about the archetype of the barren woman. And so with that, I'm going to switch the perspective so that we can see the cards as they come out. Like, this is some crazy deep energy. I did not expect to be like this overwhelmed when I sat down. I think we're going to get a little bit emotional in this reading. So if you're not in that place, and I know that like times are tough, things are hard, and everybody needs relief and everyone needs entertainment, and our spiritual walk should enlighten us. It should bring us lighter. It should make us lighter. The heaviness should lift a little bit. But sometimes I take on topics that are legitimately heavy. And the reason I do it is because I don't see it being done in other places in this way. And I feel like for those people in the past in history, our ancestors, and for those of us who have also in one way or another had this story, had this archetype, been a part of what it means to not have kids. And I'm taking my bracelets off for some reason. So whatever energies I'm working with really want me to be comfortable. There's something to be said for honoring and offering a gift and offering an offering to these energies that have been such an important part of the ecosystem, such an important part of the lives of every one of our ancestors. There are these beautiful people who their their ecosystem, job was not to have the experience of giving birth for whatever reason. And especially to be a woman, when you think about mother, maiden, crone. I was praying to Hecate before I started, and I said, mother, maiden, crone, that's the phases of a woman's journey when we think about the archetypes. But mother is very specific to an experience that not all women have. Not all divine feminine energies have that. And how do we reconcile with a image of what it is to be female that when we think about these ancient relics that we find, these statues, so many of those images are very fertile. It's fertility. It's the fertility goddess. It's the mother earth. But to be a divine feminine energy and not give physical birth, not participate in that aspect of that, the symbol mother is pregnant. What is that? What does that mean? How do we reconcile that? How do we move with that? Love will flourish, encirclement. How do we bring this story to a better resolution? And how do we get that revelation from the experience of encountering these energies? So let me just begin to pull cards, because I'm like all over the place here. And I'm wearing a big fuzzy blanket. The energies that I was working with surprised me. I always have them sort of help me sort of set up, just so I can get a feel for the energies that I'm going to be channeling. And they were very concerned with my comfort. The entire time they were very caring. Oh shit. I can feel the wave of this channel coming through, and it is actually this is a deep channel. Another thing I want to say is that when I was doing this research, I recognized that it didn't seem like there was anyone talking about the aspect of the archetype of the barren woman, very specifically being the woman who wants to have children and cannot. The pain of whatever that journey is. I think people speculate about it. Perhaps there are books about it. There are probably bodies of work around this very topic that needs to be explored and has been explored, but I haven't done that exploring. As I enter into this space energetically, I do feel like an underrepresentation in what it means to speak openly of that experience, share that experience, have comfort and compassion around that experience. One of the most painful things that I think I see is when people say, do you have children? Why not? Are you going to have children? It's just the most natural question for a lot of people. But for somebody who can't, for whatever reason, by way of circumstances, wherever they find themselves, whatever they're dealing with, health reasons, that question becomes an excruciating one. And so I want to bring a sensitivity around the aspect of the archetype of the barren woman that is the woman that doesn't choose. And what does that mean? How is that something, so we are talking to those energies. Stardust and soil, opposites attract, and under siege, uproot your habits. Let's get some more cards, because those are interesting starter cards given the topic that we're dealing with. With the stardust and soil, and this was something that I was feeling over and over again, because I called forth the ancestors that were a variety of didn't have children or had children that they didn't want. Somehow that's important, and I don't know exactly why, but we're going to bring everything in. But there was this aspect of the stardust and soil. There were these high priestess energies that had chosen not to have children as part of what their devotion to God meant. And so when I called these ancestors forward, there were different representations within these groups. And one of them was a group of women, a group of divine feminine energies, who basically explained that we're the spouse of God. And it wasn't just the nuns, because there was the long period of Christianity, and those they take a vow of celibacy. It wasn't just those. There were other groups that took vows of celibacy, other forms of religious practice and religious observance that operated around vows of celibacy. And so I was looking at that, and I was thinking to myself, wow, this is we don't have these stories. We don't really get into this. And those energies said, this is because, and some of these women became nuns. They became the spouse of God, the temple virgin, the temple, those that are willing to be celibate because they couldn't have children. It wasn't a choice. So there's this thing that they were sort of telling me with the stardust and soil about how there are those of them that feel very much, well, this is my call because I procreate with the divine. I tend to the flock that is untended. I'm a mother to those without a mother. I create and nurture into it, this thing over here. That is where that aspect of mothering comes in for me. And so there are aspects of mothering that are related to worship, that are related to tending, with the stardust and soil. But under siege and uproot your habits, that's, I think, this pain point. And so we have this light and shadow really represented even in these two cards here. And with the Five of Wands, a conflict. So I always look at archetypes because I see them as like a shadow and a light aspect, and the whole point of moving through an archetypal structure, an archetypal story as a god, as a soul, is to bring clarity where there, like evolution and development through that archetype, maturation through the lifespans that embody it. And so the under siege would be this shadow aspect of the barren woman. And again, we see these in stories. We have these in our imagination. This is an archetype that lives in everybody's collective unconscious imagination as somebody who is unfortunate. And so we're going to look at both of these things with the Five of Wands here. Let's get some more cards. Let's see. There's a, this is something that came through a reading this week. It's something I'm seeing again now in response, like in this area with this topic. So much of what I'm seeing in the way of barren women who are stepping forward are women who kind of are saying, I wasn't chosen by love. I wasn't chosen by romantic love. I have a woman stepping forward saying, I was not, she's beautiful too. It's like shocking. She's like, I was not chosen by romantic love. And so therefore my barrenness extends into a lovelessness. And so she wants to speak now. And so we're going to let her speak. But with the Five of Wands, the Emperor, and the Page of Wands here, what we're looking at is a conflict with this force of nature over our nature when it comes to producing children. And the Two of Wands is a plan with the Ace of Swords of bringing some truth into this space. So at the very heart of this, we see this conflict, this anger, this anguish that is like, I was supposed to have this experience because I have this body, or I have this sense of myself. Like, why doesn't, and this can really be like biological in a lot of ways. Why does not like who I am match my capacity? And this can be like, why I feel like I'm a woman. I feel like I am, fully female and supposed to be having this romantic experience of love, as being appreciated in this aspect of expression. I want to embody the divine feminine archetype fully. This is my birthright. Or this should have been my birthright. Or why did I get shortchanged? Why did this thing have dominion over what I'm capable of doing? Why do I have something that is opposing my fertility? And that can even be like my capacity to create. Why can't I create? Why can't I sustain life? And one of the main reasons, as we see, is the archetype, the ancestor that stepped forward and says, I wasn't chosen by love. So let's look at that. Because that's an extremely painful one, and I think it falls under the shadow aspect of the barren woman. Because when I was researching this or thinking about this, because the reason why we're doing this reading is because earlier in the week, like, I started to hear this like whisper, this energy, like, this barren woman sort of showed up, and she was clear. She's like, I'm a barren woman, and I was like, well, that's a term that maybe we don't want to. And she's like, no, this is the term. And so when we look at what that experience is, it is an experience of planting seeds that don't grow, or toiling for a certain kind of experience or a certain kind of harvest that doesn't come to fore. And I see other ancestors stepping forward, women who says, I was chosen I wasn't chosen by love. I was chosen by marriage. I was chosen for that experience, and I was promised that experience, but love never showed up. Love never came, and I'm seeing women who were forced to marry men that didn't love them, and they expected that that love would come, and it never did. And so we have this barrenness in the way of even being able to create the substance of love, being able to have that experience. So let's see what the Five of Wands is, more particularly. And so in shadow, under siege, uproot your habits. I mean, I think that this is going to be a very specific prison that barren women, a woman having the experience of feeling that she's barren finds herself in. And so I think we're going to come back to this shadow aspect and talk about what that prison ends up being, because we're going to plan our way to some greater truth here with the Ace of Swords and the Two of Wands. So with that Five of Wands, man, is this painful. Holy crapola. Like, I knew it was going to, I'm a barren woman, technically. You know, if we look at the technical term, I had circumstances that made it impossible for me to conceive of bringing life forward in the time span that I had to be fertile. And so and it was an excruciating, like, over a long period of time, like, recognizing that it wouldn't be a possibility, and being in a bad situation that was similar to these ancestors who like not being chosen by love. I mean, I was chosen by love, and I think people can be chosen by love in a certain kind of way when we look at something like a failed marriage. You know, it's not that you weren't chosen by love, but the love couldn't sustain. It was something that died. No one was nurturing it. It wasn't feeding. It was emaciated. You know, all the ways that we are failed in something like producing a fertile atmosphere for that sort of thing. And so when we think about this level of pain, when I tap into this current, you know, so many of our ancestors were persecuted for this. I see a woman who steps forward and she says, she keeps on repeating the phrase, you're supposed to produce a male heir. What good are you if you can't produce a male heir? And she's like she shows me a mare, like a breeding, like a breeding horse that is put out to pasture when it won't produce. And just the agony of that experience of like all of your, and the persecution. So we have, and then I'm seeing another person whose family just won't get them a proper Christmas present. Like this unspoken punishment that because you didn't achieve your status in this way, you just have to deal with being forgotten or being second-class citizens. You know, so the ways in which women are persecuted or punished for not being able to bear children, when the punishment of not being able to bear children for somebody who wants to is in and of itself an excruciating burden to bear. So we're talking about the archetype of the barren woman at this point as one who is under siege with a kind of cruelty, in addition to what feels like a failure or what feels like an experience that was promised but unfulfilled. And when we look at roots here, we have an ancestor who's stepping forward and saying, there's so many of your ancestors that did not have children that we don't have stories about. She's showing me family trees, and she's saying, go look at the family trees. Somebody do a grand analysis. She's very cool. I like her. She's like, go look at every family tree, and what you're going to see is the prevalence of unmarried people, the prevalence of people who did not reproduce is so much proportionally higher than you are taught to believe or taught to understand. And that we make up an enormous portion of the ecosystem, and the things that we do in that ecosystem are so critical and so crucial that if we were not here, the world would collapse in a number of ways. That the world requires people who are not busy raising children to do things that are necessary. And so when I see this fourth house of roots, there are genes that persist in the gene pool of humanity that are non-reproducing, that create people who are non-reproducing for very specific purposes. And they are often holy purposes. But the stories that we have about them, they're just so underrepresented. And when they do show up, they're showed up as historically accurate in that they were always persecuted, in that they were always left out. And it's being left out of experience and then being double left out of that experience, because you're left out of the experience that people have when they are able to have a child and every single thing that entails. That's being left out of an experience of life that can be very painful. It can feel very alienating. And So we're looking at that in terms of this Five of Wands, this conflict around an order, you know, and a situation that you don't have power over when it comes to being able to hold an inspiration, and under siege by these stories that don't actually bring that representation of the people who chose not to reproduce and chose to serve another purpose in what they nurtured and brought life to, even if that purpose was caring for themselves, because they come from a long lineage of people who prayed for a life where they could just be okay and care for themselves after all of the misery or all of the hardships and all of the toil. And there's also those who had to make this sacrifice of hope because there was no other choice, but they served their purpose so that the world would have the gift that was what they were here to do, what they were here to bring. And the different forms that love takes, and the different ways in which love is appreciated, and that there are those who are like that love takes a lot of different forms. And so there's so much here, but damn, does it feel like a deep wound, a like extremely deep wound with the 12th house of surrender. So I'm actually having trouble with this notion of the 4th house. Like, they're just people who are, this is what it is. And then the 12th house of surrender, that's like a higher calling or a type of calling that, you know, entails this. And so this flow is like, I think our ancestors are even trying to help me get a hold of this a little bit. I'm fighting with 5 of Wands, with the people who choose to not have children, and what it means to honor that choice and have places for people who don't have children, whether it's by choice or not choice. It's like an equal pain point, but and one is like, both are punished, but in different ways. And so there's something here about the inheritance of genes where this is the story over and over again. Those genes carry a lot of like underappreciated, really, with the crossroads and Hecate, but things are changing with clarity and connection. One of the hardest things that I found when I went looking for like examples of people talking about, you know, trying to reproduce or wanting to reproduce or not being able to have kids, basically. I went looking for people who were struggling with that. And I think that there were people who were like on a journey of trying to get pregnant, you know, and the excruciating like pain of whatever that journey was. And that was, a lot of them did get pregnant. So I'm just I'm having a hard time with this. This is really out of control. There's so many things coming at me at once. I didn't find people talking about not being able to have kids because of circumstances and the agony and the grief with that. And I know that there are tons of people like that. I didn't find people talking about not being able to have kids because they weren't chosen by romantic love. Like, I didn't see any of that. And there are tons of people with that situation. Tons. And no one really, you know, not that whole arena of experience is so underexplored. There's so much shame around it with the 12th house and the roots, that even as I sit with our ancestors, like looking for our ancestors to lift us up, to help us heal, there are just like these stories in our lineage. I'm seeing a woman step forward. She's saying, I was a slave. That whole experience of love and marriage and children was taken from me. I was in the house. I wasn't even allowed around I wasn't allowed to have those experiences. Like, this was taken from me. This was stolen. And I'm seeing another ancestor, you know, step forward, and she's beaten in the face, and she says, she was taking she's showing me a formula. She's like, I had to protect myself from bringing a baby into a situation where they would be subject to what I was subject to. She was a hero. She's saying I was a hero. I knew that what that monster would do. I knew that we wouldn't be free if I brought a child into a situation where they would be subject to such violation and violence. I would not be able to survive it. And so she's showing me like what she had to do, and she's showing me some kind of a paste. And so these stories, what about these stories do we not tell? What about these stories do we not communicate with that 5 of Wands? What are we at odds with? Because the Emperor is also like it's a belief system, it's a worldview. And under siege is going to be this caricature of somebody who holds no place, no real place. You know, we pity them because they just, you know, they're not going to have those experiences. They're not going to have a place when they're old. And what I'm being shown with these, what looks like maps of family trees, is they have a place. They have an effing place. You know what I mean? And so there's cause to be angry about that with the Knight of Wands here. Cause to be angry about like what it means to bury the place in clarity and in this the archetype in a light aspect and a shadow aspect. The shadow aspect is hidden. The shadow aspect is shamed. The shadow aspect is buried under the opinions of others about the experience that they're not having. And in clarity, in light aspect, this is something that is holy somehow. This story is holy. This experience is holy. The connection that you have to the divine in the absence of other nutrients is holy. And so much so that austerity is built into a lot of religious practices when it comes to being a mystic, when it comes to being a saint, when it comes to being a holy person. To carve out that type of relationship with divine energies, there is something to be said for a different type of procreation, a different kind of importance, a different role, a different purpose. And the Knight of Wands is about passion. And so I see these ancestors stepping forward and they're saying, what of our passions? What of our passion for life? What of our passion for love? What of our passion for laughter? What of our passion for dance? What of our passion for lifting people up? What of our passion for healing the sick? What of the passions that in the absence of other calls on our nature, we could give ourselves to in complete and total holiness? What about the passions of our giftedness? The passions that we had over plants and medicine, the passions that we had over art, the passions that we had for lovemaking. Where in these stories about those who did not bear the substance of a certain fruit, do we have the absence of all other blooming? When there was so much blooming, there was so much blooming. And I see these ancestors step forward with these arms full of blooming flowers, these gardens. Whew. I knew that this was going to be an intense one. With the Ten of Pentacles, this value, this inheritance, this with the world is changing. Ten of Pentacles is going to be your generational wealth. And when I look at wealth, I see the inheritance that comes with the genes that you inherited, your smile, your sense of humor, the shape and of your nose that smells in a certain way that is able to produce, you know, an appreciation for some certain things over others, your taste in food. We inherit the richness of everything that we are connected to in the way of our heritage. Even if we don't know our ancestors, even if their histories were buried, their sense of humor is alive in you. Their sense of taste with food is alive in you. Why do you think you prefer one thing and not another? There's a long story that goes along with that. And there's a whole range of experience that participates in the evolution of that particular trait. And so this gift that we have of these genes that come into this world, these energies that they know that their purpose isn't not having children. They don't want children. Because the type of nurturing and bringing life that they do requires a certain type of relationship with the world and with themselves. That's a choice. And then there is inheriting genes that prohibit the expression of a certain kind of quality of life. And what it means to want and not get, the grief associated with what does that refined property really bring to the expression of the whole, to our understandings of ourselves, to what they produce in absence of that other experience, that other type of blooming. I see a piece of fruit that is born. When I was in my meditation, this song came through about a piece of fruit that a tree that bears fruit in the winter. And that apple that is frozen on the tree is still connected to the mother, to the tree. It's still connected to its source of life. The apple is frozen every night by a frost that preserves its beauty well into late winter, and it never truly ages, and it never truly falls off of its source of life. And it has a completely different experience than the fruit that is picked and eaten. And who's to say one experience is better than the other, is what our ancestors are telling us. Who's to make that determination? That's where we have to, under siege, we have to remove these stories that are false stories about what this experience is and what this experience could be and why everyone is of value. With the flow here and the Two of Wands I was like, why are these ancestors so loving and nurturing? Why did they want me to put me in like this cozy sweater thing? You know, when I thought that they weren't going to be fierce, you know, they were so completely nurturing and loving. They still are. And compassionate too. They have these qualities of depth of vision based on the grief that they have endured. They're able to see in ways that others can't see because of their very unique vantage point. They gave birth in ways that often were unwitnessed. And there's a lot of unwitnessed, like, but the witness, it's so interesting. It's like so hard for me to get this exactly right. Under siege, this is a prison, right? So I'm gonna add a couple cards on that. It's actually really painful. Like, I keep on bumping up against this feeling of the siege, the under siege, the uproot your habits, the way that people treat you when you don't have children. It's horrible. The way that people like pity you when you don't have children because they know that they've had an experience of love that you're not going to have. And the same goes for lacking an experience of romantic love. Like, it comes with a lot of shame. There's something wrong with you. Like, it's mountains of shame, in fact. I think it's Brene Brown. I forget the citation exactly. But Brene Brown said, I forget exactly what it is, but it's guilt is that you did something wrong and there's some ability for you to correct it and you feel guilty and now you can make the correction, you can overcome it. It's I did something wrong and I can see very specifically that I did something wrong. Shame is there's something wrong with me. And when every story about what it is to be a divine feminine energy, you know, in that aspect, operating in that aspect, when every story about what it is to be a woman is to go through a phase that you give birth, you are the mother, you know, that's part of your cycles. Every month you are reminded that you are here to participate in the cycles of life and death, rebirth, and like it's you're meant to have these experiences. You're designed for these experiences. You're prepared for these experiences. You're promised this experience. You see this experience playing out in every family structure that exists. To be left out of that experience is something that people fear happening. They fear it. You know, they fear it when they're young. That like it strikes. It's such a core like ice. I remember when I was like 14 or 15 years old, and I'm psychic, right? And so I was looking and I was thinking about I wanted to be a mom. Just give me a minute because this is hitting. I remember knowing that I wouldn't. I remember the pain, like it was like I felt like this cold, like knife of terror hit my heart so completely when the feeling washed over me that this wasn't here, that this wasn't in this life. And then I began to like accept it in a defiance, you know, fine, I don't want kids, I never wanted kids. And then I would go back and forth, well, maybe, you know, I don't believe myself, you know. It was a weird thing, you know. And so there's this fear, I think, that people have from a very young age that they're going to somehow be left out of what family means. You are born to a family, and whether that family is good or bad, one of the primary things that you want to participate in is to like be in a family. You're born in a family, you're raised in a family, you exist in a family. Even when it's a terrible family, you know what a good family is supposed to be. People grow in ecosystems, in habitats, in families, in connection. It's so vital to feel like you have a place in the world. And when there is a position where you can't meet that role and you are suddenly displaced in the world, that displacement, when you work through what that means, it's being set apart. It's on the outside looking in. It's an experience that seems like most people don't have. That alienation, that othering. People are afraid of it. The things that they're afraid of, they scorn. The things that they are afraid of, they cast blame. You offended God. How many of our ancestors who couldn't give birth, everyone, you offended God. You're a witch. You did something. You're cursed. Something is wrong with you. The accumulated shame around what it means to be participating with life through this archetype story is really heavy. And I think when we begin to think about that under siege, that prison. So I saw something in a reading this week, and I saw it on TV, right? So this is an example, and I'm going to bring that example here too, because I think it applies, and I think it applies in a lot of different ways. There's a documentary, and it's Amanda Knox. It was wrongfully convicted in Italy of a murder, and she goes back to Italy, really, I think, working heavily with the technology of forgiveness and power. Beautiful, beautiful. She's a beautiful woman, beautiful writer, you know. And so she wrote this incredible speech. And in this speech, she talked about, and she was brave. This is worth watching. I'm going to find the name of it somewhere. I just can't remember what it is. Maybe it's Amanda Knox Goes Back to Italy or something like that. But in this speech, she's talking about the experience of, it's like a curse, right? You know, she was wrongfully accused, and in the tabloids, Foxy Noxy was this character that the Italian tabloids had taken the, you know, fever dream of the prosecutor and fashioned for themselves a villain, a murderous sex vixen. And when she, on the day that she was sentenced to prison, the press was cheering because they were going to put this murderous sex vixen into the prison cell. They created a caricature. They created a puppet, a false image, an idol, an evil icon, using her face and using her name. And they did this to what was essentially just a very innocent 18-year-old girl. I think she was 17 or 18 years, maybe 18, 19 years old. Young, little girl. She's a little girl. Little girl just having her first experience of, one of her first experiences of love. Little girl in a foreign place, a little scared, a little disoriented. Little girl unaware of like proper ways of maybe responding to things. Who not really not guilty, period. So whatever the little girl is doing, it's innocent. They marched a little girl into a prison cell. They did not march Foxy Noxy into a prison cell. So to be imprisoned by the caricature, by the monster that people create in your image, is a burden in life. And so, you know, I think part of what we're looking at when we explore this notion of the barren woman is carrying the burden of a caricature about someone who has no place, no role, has no value, is not important, is not worthy of love, is an afterthought, is a second-class citizen, is somebody who we pity, when the opposite is true. When what our ancestors tell me is that no, these are the spouses of the divine. These are the spouses of the gods. So maybe we need a different story. Maybe we need to think about what that different story might offer. And maybe what is on offer in that story is something that we are uniquely fashioned to receive. And maybe that story isn't supposed to include some horrible caricature of family, of not having family, not having a place in the family, when there's nothing more important than a really cool, quirky, hilarious auntie. Of that I am sure, right? And so with Standstill being about this, like a fruit that is preserved, connected to the tree in the frost, it is, it never rots. That's beautiful, actually. Diligent, delight. I felt something very intense just now when I was tapping in, and it stung like a really bad wound, like assault on a wound, with abundance here and with openness. I see these women stepping forward again, and they're carrying big bouquets, these blooming bouquets of abundant beauty and abundant wisdom and incredible art. And I just see like this refinement of bringing inspiration in and making it like I see it like the nurturing of gardens, the nurturing of orphans, the nurturing of music, the nurturing of song, the nurturing of a piece of work, a book. I see them, they're holding hands and they're spread out over the map and they're lifting everyone up. They're in the invisible places. And so I see this abundance here, and I have this stark contrast. I was living in Texas for a very short time because I was sick and I needed to be near my mom. She was helping me and I'm better and everything's fine. But it was a very difficult point in my life. One of the most painful points of my life. And I was around these, like it was a small town in Texas, like 3 hours in every direction from any reasonably sized city. And it was all these like Christian fundamentalist, like white supremacist types. Like it was thick with that very like foul odor. And they hated single women. They feared them. The childless woman was really considered to be a threat. The woman who is not married was a threat. And the other women were vicious. And they were vicious, they were mean, they were like cruel in the most undermined, secret, matriculating, gossiping. It was like takedown of a hostile enemy, and you can't trust her. And there was this one woman who my mom worked with that she was a woman who wasn't married, and she had a child that she adopted, someone who needed a place to go. But she was unmarried, and she had never given like physical birth. And they talked the most cruel smack about this woman who like was alone in a town all the time and had no one, because she wasn't part of what they like were including in their experience of family, because they didn't have a place for somebody like that except pity or charity, but definitely scorn and definitely shame. And so I think about all of the gifts that woman has for her community and everything that she has in the way of kindness and wisdom, and that she would be a asset at every dinner party, that she would be a wonderful addition to every holiday like jamboree. And I don't know this woman's life and I don't know where she is on the holidays, but I felt from her such a sting of alienation. And when we don't value people because we're afraid to look at a circumstance that we only perceive in a certain way, then we miss out on the abundance of what they have to offer. And so with this standstill and this delight and this embracing, there's a lot to develop, in terms of an appreciation and understanding of these roles with the Ten of Pentacles and the World card. The world is changing. A new worldview is arising from the ashes of the old. And what we inherit in the way of this particular strain of wisdom and intuition, I want to keep on going. I am finding it hard to appreciate this. Honestly, like I'm sitting here and I'm like, I'm all of these stories about fertility in relationship to women when most of our ancestors had no control over their reproductive experience. And when they have shame that is mountains high around this caricature of a barren woman. But what about I'm moving from ancestor to ancestor, and then I'm over here with this other ancestor that didn't want children, that didn't want to get married, that took on a habit, quite literally, of like whatever religious order would allow that freedom. And we're going to speak to that a little bit right now. Because there's the choice to enter under siege of everyone's dismissal related to people that don't contribute in a certain kind of way. The women on women violence when it comes to women who don't want to have children or women who can't have children is very high, because it is something that they fear. And there's an assumption that there's a war going on here. Now, I remember when I was, again, back to Texas, like I'm an out witch, you know what I mean? I identify as a witch, like publicly. And that town had never even met somebody who wasn't a Christian, never mind somebody who like was a witch. And everyone had this belief about witchcraft that it is against Christianity, and that witches are casting spells on Christians, and they hate the Christians, and they hate the Christian God. And witches mostly don't give a crap about Christians or the Christian God, doesn't even think about them. Nobody thinks about them. You know, it's like a narcissistic point of view. But they cast them as opposition. They cast them as a threat. And so when you have the women who choose not to have children, or the women who were not chosen by love, or, you know, and for whatever reason find themselves in the position of cast as the villain. No one chooses to be cast as a villain unless they 100% decide that they want to live. And so I have an ancestor who's standing before me and says, you know what the mortality rate is on childbirth? Half the women die. She saw her sisters die. She saw her mother die. She knew that to have children was also, in all likelihood, to die of that very thing. And she did not want to leave her nieces and nephews alone. She did not want to leave her post as the person who loved them and took care of them. And she very much didn't know. She said, absolutely no, you're not going to use me like a breeding mare, and I don't want to die. I love myself. I love my life. I love the love that I've created in my life. And I'm not going to take on the mantle of that burden. I'm not going to wait every year to find out whether I get to live or not. And I don't care what people say. I don't care what they think of me. And she's almost offering that, you know, as something that, you know, stand boldly in your position of having a life that belongs to you. Stand boldly in your position of the love that you have to offer those who benefit from your choice to give in a way that is unique, to mother in a way that is unique. Because I'm seeing with Hecate, like because I was saying to her, like, how do we reconcile the maiden mother crone picture of a woman's experience, of a divine feminine experience, when those cycles don't include everybody? And what she's saying is, no, the mother is not, absolutely and completely, strictly speaking, the mother is not a purely biological process. We mother. The woman does, the divine feminine energy does, in fact, nurture and mother. What they nurture and mother could be anything. But that there is a insemination of inspiration, and then bringing that inspiration into form in a type of creating life and nurturing life. And when we talk about the barren woman who, because she is for one reason or another in a circumstance where she can't create life of her life, she can't create the project, she can't create the thing, she's in one way or another captive, enslaved to something that is taking that life force energy, demanding that life force energy be spent on mere survival. That is a very cruel and very difficult place to find yourself. And then this guy is saying, but you know what? It's the same sacrifice that a mother makes in a different way. A mother makes a sacrifice where her life force energy quite literally goes into preserving the life of the children that she gives birth to, and all the things that go into preserving that life. In the absence of that experience, there is no absence of preserving life. It's just you're preserving life in a different way. But the life force energy goes somewhere. The life force energy always goes somewhere. And the ecosystem requires it. And so what you create and give to the world is of value. It is nurturing the growth of others. It will nurture the growth of others, even if the growth of others is a beautiful garden. Even if the growth of others is a colony of cats. That cat woman and the barren woman together, like, this is a picture that we think about as in shadow with the puppeteer. But we want to move away from that and think about that let's think about that for another beat. Let's give that story a twist and a turn. Think about the woman who takes that nurturing energy and she gives it to the animals who are starving and cold in her community. And from all stretches comes every animal that needs help knows where the house of the woman with a heart to love and nurture the earth resides. All of the crows know where this woman lives. Every bird passes by and knows that they can send the kitten there. They can send the stray dog to that house. And that lost things can be found and nurtured and brought to life by her. That the bird who needs a mended wing is at home in her warm studio. So what about the childless Catwoman are we really finding fault with? Let's recast that story. Let's take it out of that chaotic place of unworthiness, unlovability, and replace that with every animal knows where to find love in the community of people, with this woman, with this person, with this divine feminine energy. And whatever the talk, whatever the story is, that caricature is not putting her in a prison. She is enjoying what it means to use those life-giving faculties where it's needed. She's meeting needs. They're meeting needs. Flowing with this abundance. So let's be open to these reinterpretations of these stories that under-examined go underappreciated. If we can't talk about them, we don't want to offend. Let's not bring it up. Don't ever even ask. Maybe you don't need to ask because you're appreciative of what that person brings. And it's not in opposition to what somebody who brings a child into the world brings. To think that a mother and someone who chooses not to have a child are opposing forces that are somehow at odds with each other when they are a complement to each other in the ecosystem of nurturing and creating life. The mom with 5 kids cannot feed every animal that comes starving to the door. So I think she should be glad that somebody can, and I think that vice versa, this lack of appreciation is also a fear of fully looking at what that experience might be, making a place and even bringing compassion to what that experience might be. What is that transformation? What is the journey that has you slowly burying your dreams of a certain experience, only to find new experience that was off the map on those dreams, that make a quality of life that should be appreciated, that is valued, that is beautiful, and does have something very precious to offer in the way of insight and perception even. Like I'm seeing a higher perception, not hierarchy, but a perception from a different viewpoint with the Queen of Pentacles here. And the Ace of Cups, look at the love that exists for this energy, this archetype. Look at the love that exists for this archetype in nature. That nature would call this a Queen of Pentacles. I'm showing, my ancestor is showing me that same house with the woman who takes all this. So she's showing me this house of this woman who takes care of all the animals that fall ill. And all the crows know and all the animals know that and this woman is constantly finding injured birds, like scrawny, hungry cats, abandoned dogs. It's just they're always around her. They're always sort of coming into this woman's energy. And so the spirits of nature, I'm seeing spirits of nature, and I'm seeing the spirits of nature say this is a queen of this land. She has dominion over this powerful magic of healing and making things comfortable and helping them pass. That is the Queen of Pentacles. That is dominion over an ecosystem. It may not be dominion over an economy, but it's dominion over an ecosystem. And it's ruling over it with compassion and care and love. And being a source of great influence, great power, great value. And so you look at that Ace of Cups, the love that the universe has, the love that nature has, The love that those who are lucky enough to encounter those who are in this position to give. To mother the mothers. That's something unique. That's something of value. With the 10 of Cups, family and emotional satisfaction in family, and the 3 of Cups, friendship. I think a lot of what we are going to be rediscovering in these next couple of years, you know, as we move into some tumultuous times, I think what we're going to be rediscovering is, I just got the saddest feeling. I just saw an ancestor who showed me 5 graves, and none of her children survived. And she's old. The unimaginable, I'm like, it's unimaginable pain. And she's showing me how for a long time she felt scorned by community, that they felt so bad for her, that they pitied her so much that they projected the depth of her need was more than they could provide care for, and they left her alone with her grief. And the tepid attempts at compassion were never enough. It's unimaginable cruelty. I have to sit here and just sit. But she's showing me this beautiful life that she created for herself. I'm like, I have to breathe slow. She became such a matriarch of her community in her older years. Like, you know, for a time, the community, it seemed that had abandoned her because they felt that her grief was too great, and she was the symbol, this caricature, imprisoned by their projections of her pain. And she says that she missed taking care of, she had one child that was disabled, and that there had been for a long time all these rumors that she was cursed because she had a disabled child, and she had to give so much care to this disabled child that, oh my God, I can barely even hold myself up thinking about, like, it's like just thinking about what she's showing me. But how much she missed caring for that child. She's showing me the food and the bath, and she said the depth of my love knew no end. The roots that were created in service of this love were so great that they reached all the way through the depths of hell and straight to heaven. She says straight to heaven's gates. Oh my God. She says the depth that you carry after you have survived these things, after you have known what it is. She's showing me something I've always known about grief, which is that grief is a powerful form of love. And when we think about when someone passes away, that is the moment that we encounter the depth of love we felt for them. And that grief highlights the depth of love that we have experienced. And so she's showing me to know the depth of her own love, to have that experience, to have that vantage point, to have that appreciation of time and love and life. That at a certain point, oh, I'm gonna cry. At a certain point, she stood up. She's showing me this austere room, this blank walls, this empty space. She said the empty space that was left in the absence of all that I had lost, and being abandoned there by love. And she says at a certain point, I stood up and I said, I know the depths of love that I hold and that I have held and that I have brought into this world in my service of it, in my devotion to that love. That even in the absence of the nurturing, of the growth of those beings, was the nurturing and the capacity of that love that was communicated through me when I stood up and I walked out that door. And I didn't care what people thought. I threw off the caricature. I laughed too loud. She's like, I partied very hard. And I told great stories in the pub. And she's like, and what the gods and goddesses brought home to me in the way of family, of people who appreciated the resilience that I was able to embody in defiance of everyone else's fear, in defiance of the abandonment, the power of my forgiveness and my ability to bring abundance and love through my experience, despite everything that they said, made me everybody's grandmother. She said I had thousands of grandchildren. And she's like, and those that had no one had me the most. And they had the value and the power of my love the most. And her voice is so powerful, it's coming through me. I can actually feel her voice. That's rare. She had such a powerful voice in community. And towards the end, there was nobody who didn't go to her for her wisdom. And so when she says to me that if you were to tell me that there is no value to my life, she said I would go back to that place that I was in that room alone, thinking that there's no value to my life. There's no value to the love that I have cultivated. There's no value to the wisdom that I have in respect to the love that I had on offer, because I had the depths of it. And I understood what power my love held. She said to accept being forgotten would have been to have failed her life's mission, because she came for this very thing, to prove them all wrong, to shed light on what it was to represent a powerful and beautiful woman that could not sustain a certain type of life, but in sustaining her own life, defied any belief that all life is not worthy of love. Oh my God. I don't have tissues right here. This is intense. We are in the Leo, I think it's a full moon in Leo. And I'm shown that right now because it's opposing planets in Aquarius. There's something with Aquarius. And the law of continuity and the law of limitation and the law of cause and effect here with Trinity. I see this beautiful picture that is being created with this Three of Cups, this celebration of life in all of its forms, the inheritance of every story and every archetype as we move from the shadow, the projection, the counterfeit, the false doctrine, and into the experience of life with those experiencing life. And we begin to appreciate what everyone has on offer, knowing that what everybody has on offer is not the same thing. There are worlds of people that don't have romantic love to offer you. There are worlds of people that don't have, like there's the relationship of biological child and their parent, like that relationship sometimes is not on offer with the law of limitation. But the love that is on offer, especially when we think about the love that we have to offer, that is something that this energy of our ancestor who showed me, you stand up and you insist. Insisting on the value of your life is something so many of us have to do. Do not fail to do so. In the face of every false story, every false doctrine, every perversion, stand up. Stand up. We stand with you. She's powerful. It's a powerful energy that I'm channeling right now. She keeps making me cry because her heart is so big. She has this big heart. I wish you guys could feel it. I think you probably can. So every once in a while I have a reading that I just cry through and we deal with it. because it's healing. She wants to offer us this healing. She's like, don't you dare internalize those lies. Your value is somehow tied to the way that you bear fruit. And she shows me the picture again. Oh my God. So I was singing this song when I was in meditation because sometimes I just like let random stuff channel through when I'm putting myself into a kind of a trance. Like I don't censor anything at that point. And this energy was singing this song. I was a fruit that was born in the winter. I was born in the winter. She showed me, and I was seeing that tree, and this tree bore all this fruit late in the season, very late in the season, at the end of the fall. And then the frost came in, and the tree never dropped, like the fruit didn't drop. And so as I looked, and so I was singing that song, and it was this great lament about being left out by nature, being unloved by nature, being unsupported by nature, because there was no one to pick the fruit and eat it. And that the fruit was preserved, though, that the frost had preserved the fruit. And so with this law of limitation, you know, the richness and the variety of the types of life that we can experience in the absence of other qualities is not to be left unexplored. And if no one is picking the fruit, it is preserved in its pristine beauty, connected to the source of all life. And there's nothing wrong with that. And it has a value, because those that will eat of that fruit will be starving. So she's showing me now that the fruit that is born late in the season, that is taken by frost, that stays on the branch, that's connected still to the tree, that never just, you know, that finally at the very end of that season, when it does finally fall and it hits the ground and it's been frozen, the animals that find it and eat it are not only starving for that preserved, beautiful gift of the earth in the form of these lives, whose bloom comes in a different way, is experienced in a different way, is experienced later, but the taste of that fruit is of the sweetest quality. And it has within it some kind of like an alcohol, and the animal gets a little drunk and a little bit warm, and it's beautiful. And so what nature provides us in the way of stories and the lives and the seasons and all of the variation and the value of the fruit that is preserved on the tree through the winter, to feed those whose its life is so valuable, to those who at the end of the winter there's no food. They have a purpose that is so incredibly important. And so that late bloom is in a very incredible type of beauty, to be incredibly appreciated and in a certain type of way. And so when we see the woman who, and we didn't even get into this, and I wanted to, who didn't want to have children but was forced to. Let's look at that a little bit, because the law of continuity, oh, you are the answered prayer. You are the answered prayer. I saw a TikTok about this, and I never remember enough to find the link, but I always really want to credit sources, because that's going to be critical if we're going to appreciate and create a net around art. She said that for the women who were forced by way of slavery, or forced by way of forced marriage slavery, to give birth, and they had to sacrifice a life that they didn't want to sacrifice, and they had to year after year bear the burden of cycles that had a 50% chance of taking their life, and they wanted to participate in ways that they weren't permitted. They got on their knees. This is somebody's TikTok. I'm going to really try to find it. They got on their knees, and somebody, if you know what this TikTok is, please help me with this. They got on their knees and they prayed every single day. I just want to be born free. I want to be me. I want to be born free. I want to be me. I want to be born free. If I come back again, I want to be born free. And so the reason that TikTok is coming up and I'm seeing that message is because that woman who made that TikTok said, you know, for every woman who prayed that prayer, you are the answer to their prayer. You are born free. You are the answer to that very prayer. And that there's something to appreciate about what this experience of freedom is. And that doesn't mean that mothers who have children aren't free and can't be free, but to think that you might be the answer to a prayer by a woman who was enslaved by childbirth. There are women stepping forward who are saying we wanted to experience life without that burden as divine feminine energies. And that meant preserving the archetype that you represent and moving it with and through you and helping you appreciate this experience, help you appreciate this role in the ecosystem, help you appreciate the value of what this means. Because there is a certain type of way that you are free to choose what you nurture, choose what you bring life to in the absence of a mandate that would have it otherwise. That connection to the divine, where you can take inspiration and begin to nurture it. The divine feminine, there it is. And so when we think about this realization around the many ways in which divine feminine energy expresses to nurture and bring life, that's what this message is giving us. Aquarius is like, it's a funny energy. Because in the age of Aquarius, I think that one of the things that we're going to be dealing with is fertility stuff. I'm sure of it. We already have a birth rate that is dropping because of late stage capitalism. And the shape and with the rainbow here, the shape of family and chosen family and participating in different kinds of families. I see these ancestors from the back coming forward and saying there's an army of you stepping forward to build community in a new way. There are so many of you purposed for a type of life and being valued in community in a type of way that isn't a typical story, because these aren't typical times. And they're showing me this narrow path that humanity has to go through and survive. And they're showing me those who are purposed to pull humanity through. And they're purposed to care for orphans en masse. And develop what it is to walk in this archetype of the barren woman that is not without a capacity to mother and nurture. And those that aren't meant to mother and nurture children are there to mother and nurture other types of life. And so as we embrace this delight, look at the Ten of Cups, happiness. Look at the Queen of Pentacles, established. Look at the Ace of Cups, loved by the divine. That ancestor that showed us that moment of standstill where she was like ready to give up. She lost all of her children. Her life had been taken over by a child who needed support every moment of every day, and she took care of that child with love. And in the absence of that child, there was nothing. Life was barren. She did not leave it there. That standstill, that death of God moment when the dreams that you had don't come to fruition, when the thing that you were relying on hour by hour, creating and nurturing, dies one way or another. That standstill, that moment of silence and the absence of the support that is needed, that call to stand up, delight will find you. Embrace the life you have been given. Because in the mystery of what that life has to offer, after you walk out of this prison of everybody else's cast spell, you break that generational curse over the banner of what is called a barren woman. And you say, in the absence of life that thrives, I am the life that thrives. And my thriving life in relationship with the divine, taking inspiration about what I want to nurture, what I want to bring life to, that choice is yours. And there's delight to be had in that process. There is a life to embrace in the absence of other types of life. There are relationships to the land, relationships to people, relationships to things that we can bring in the way of our abundance. If we are opened to a value of a fruit that is preserved, to meet a certain type of hunger in the universe, one that is of great value. And so our guides want you to when we look at this, we pick ourselves up. Whatever life has not flourished at our hands, even if it's ambition, we have a standstill. We have a moment of grief. And in the absence of other life, we pick ourselves up. We nurture our own life. We find the delight in celebrating ourselves and celebrating those who we come to dote on by our own choice, by our own ambition, on the things that we choose to bring life to. I see somebody painting. Oof. Look at the temple being built here in the center of this mountain. And then past the desert with the one. So when we think about the shadow and the one in the desert here, yeah, you know, there is grief. You know, this mountain is, I'm looking at the shape here, and I'm seeing this light as being like the same color. And I'm seeing the shape of the mountain and the shape of this temple. From deep within, there's a devotion that is taking place here. A beautiful light, a beautiful power, a beautiful ability, a beautiful voice, a beautiful perspective, a depth of love that maybe has not been fully explored. This mountain is full of gems. It's full of crystals. It's full of the most beautiful formations that the earth has. It is powerful. It is majestic. It is a temple. And when you bring life to that temple, like there's something so powerful here, because the spirit, Spirit showing me this delight, this beauty, this creativity, that yes, we may be in the desert. Many people are in the desert on how to be without the roles, how to be appreciated, how to be valued when other things are failing. And when the things that you were promised that don't hold life, or the relationships that you put energy in fail, or they don't produce the kind of support, there's a strength that comes of that. There's a depth that comes of that. There's an intuition that comes of that. There's an appreciation that comes from a different vantage point. And so with the temple here being about a holy purpose, a holy space, a holy calling, I invite you to I invite everyone here to take a look at what we consider our failures, to take a look at what we consider the miscarriages around hope and what we wanted to create and what we wanted to nurture and what we wanted to sustain. The things that were aborted. And when we can appreciate that there is grief, that there is a loss, but the grief tells you how much you loved something, even a dream. And that depth of love that you created in that space, participating with that hope, is not for nothing. It has a lot to offer. And so what we're going to do is we're going to remove these manipulation, these strings of shame that people carry. We're going to remove the hurt from the slights that are inflicted, from one group to another through some this crazy prison, this caricature. And we want to free this archetype to express in a new way. We want to leave these chaotic waters, and we want to take a look at what this inheritance has to offer, because it's 10 of Pentacles with this world here, this change, this new chapter. And on the bottom of the deck, we have 3 of Cups, which is a celebration with others, being celebrated by others. That is not off the table just because there's not a Hallmark card for you. It's really important that if people don't appreciate this, go somewhere else. Pick up there's a Bible verse that has been coming through readings a lot lately. Pick up your sandals, knock the dirt off, and leave. Any space that would put you in a prison. People who position you as the villain and find underhanded ways of undermining your value because they think it's in opposition to theirs. I mean, there's so much there. The 2 of Wands is a plan to move forward into life with a different perspective, with the truth about what is on offer in the experience of moving through life, carrying in one way or another this archetype, either by choice or by circumstance. This archetype is an archetype that offers love. It offers perspective. It offers nurturing life in a million different places. And so whatever grief we have here with this fight, you know, we started with the card, the 5 of Wands, the fight that we may be feeling, that people might feel around what it is to carry this archetype, walk with this archetype. Begin to engage with the ancestors who've lived these lives. Begin to engage with the archetype in a manner that is healing and emancipating it, instead of falling into, I see someone falling into these ruminations and falling into these depths of despair around not being chosen for love, not being chosen by life to bring life in the form of a biological child. I see that grief, that left out, that anguish, the why did nature purpose me in this way? Why can't I just express what it is to nurture life like everyone else expresses what it is to nurture life? Why do I have to go without? Why do I have to be cast aside? You know, there's so much here in these stories about the way that other people treat you because of what they perceive your role is, the way that they want to cast you in their dark imaginations. And there's grief about having to wear that caricature. There's a loneliness in a prison cell that they march you into when they impose that view on you. And your guides would say, stand up, walk out. You've grieved enough. You've grieved enough. Mother of dreams, you've grieved enough. Mother of gardens, you've grieved enough. Mother of lost souls, you've grieved enough. Mother of hurt animals, you've grieved enough. Mother of stories, you've grieved enough. Mother who advocates for those who aren't advocated for, you've grieved enough. You're not without the force of nature that is mothering. You represent the force of nature that is mothering in the absence of all approval. You represent the force of nature that is mothering of your own life and your own precious flame. I'm seeing this this little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine. It's like somebody who's putting a bowl over the light and not letting it shine. And from that place of despair, that light begins to go out. And your ascended ancestors and your ascended guides and your ascended grandmothers and your ascended mothers and your ascended forms of those grandmothers and those mothers that walk with you, that did not have children in their life, but they mother you, mothering yourself as you mother that light. And as you take that bowl that smothers the love, you know, that smothering mother is an archetype, a part of the mothering archetype that smothers out the life that wants to emerge because there's another story that they want to impose on it. And your life wants to emerge. And so stop imposing any story on that life that is a grief over not having a particular expression or aspect of what it is to participate with life in that way. Because you are called to nurture, and you are called to thrive, and you are called to delight, and you are called to being established, and you are called to being valued, and you are 10 of Pentacles, and so needed. And so to the archetype of the Barren Woman, we celebrate her for everything that she offers, and for the place that she lives in our own lives, in our own experience with the things that we nurtured with love, and that love is all that remains. And so with that, I think we're going to close the reading. We're going to end it there. I'm just going to get 3 more cards from my guides, because the Bardo speaks to the uncreated. You know, it's that the Bardo is I always see it as the underworld. It's the place of the different levels of the afterlife, you know, that journey. And often the Bardo is this darkness of, in the absence of life, there is just grief, but you are called on a pilgrimage with the life that you hold. And I'm seeing the flame and allowing that glow to illuminate the world around you, to step out of that place of there is no life here, and to step into a journey with the life that you hold, and to no longer be at war with or fighting a story of barrenness. We're going to move away from this position of the puppeteer That's the story. This under siege is people who want to manipulate this for their own whatever supremacy. It's a sickness. Anyone who, you know, the shadow aspect of the archetype. There's a lot we're gonna have to do a whole thing on that. But here, let's get the 3 cards because our guides are saying now it's time. Now it's time. With the beginnings here in the east. And the depth here with the lake. And the mystery here with the dark matter. And the creation on the bottom of the deck. There is a lot that is uncreated in the space of stories and appreciation and the spectacular, beautiful thing that I'm seeing that I can't get words around. In what it is to take these stories out of a darkness of the past and bring them to light as we move into a new beginning, where we take that depth of experience, that depth of wisdom, and that perspective into a mystery of transformation and create something new. And so your guides are inviting you with power in the bottom of the deck, with the 2 of Wands and the Ace of Swords, to take this truth into your experience. Wherever you fall around the story of not being able to sustain life in the way that you expected or had hoped, and having to work with other things, that process of creation, they're calling you out of any shadow, any shutdown on that. And they're asking you to access that depth and bring it to this mystery of what am I meant to create and bring into this world and nurture? What is the life that I am meant to nurture and grow in the way of my own life, in the way of the lives around me, in harmony, you know, because the law of cause and effect at the bottom of the deck and openness to abundance is saying with every effort, with a realization that you are worth something, that you are needed, that you are of value, even when people think otherwise. Every effort in that direction of unity with your purpose, unity with your life, the archetypes that you embody, the law of cause and effect brings that abundance, that depth. Be open to receive creative vision on what's next. And so with that, I'm going to leave that because that is a lot and I'm feeling really overwhelmed, but I think that's a really beautiful message because all of these cards, 10 of Pentacles, the World, 3 of Cups, power, creation, Ace of Swords, 2 of Wands, plan for a new beginning here. And we're going to flow, you know, even through these feelings into a place of communication and nurturing around what it is to bring light to this. And so with that, we're going to leave this reading and I wish you all the best and I'll see you again next week.